الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الكريم وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن استنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين. All praise is due to Allah, and may Allah's peace and blessings be on the last Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and on all those who follow the path of righteousness until the last day. My half of the discussion, called Public School Damage, focuses on what happens in public school, which is of particular relevance to the future of our youth, that we need to be very conscious, very aware, to be able to make the right decisions in order to establish Islam here in Canada and to ensure that it is passed on to the next generation. First and foremost, I would just like to clarify what the actual meaning of education is according to the specialists. We tend to think of it as just knowledge being passed on. This is education. You teach the kids science, maths, English, knowledge. However, the specialists analyzing education, they describe it as the transfer of culture from one generation to the next. The transfer of culture from one generation to the next. Of course, that culture is coming in a knowledge package. But they didn't stress knowledge. They stressed culture. And this is what is at the root of it. For us, generally speaking, when we think about this in public schools, we get worried about Christmas. The kids come home, they're talking about Christmas. You have to be telling them, no, we don't believe in Christmas. Santa Claus is a lie. You know, we have to be trying to, damage control. This is what we're engaged in, dealing with this. Or birthdays, they want to celebrate their birthday. No, we as Muslims, we don't celebrate birthdays. Why? Why don't we celebrate birthdays? Valentine's Day, giving out Valentine's Day cards. The little girls want to kiss your sons. The boys want to kiss your daughters. You say, astaghfirullah, it's public schools. We think this is really, terrible. However, the real damage, the real problem is way beyond this. Because when we talk about education and the transfer of culture, we're talking about secular culture. Secular culture. Secular democratic culture. This is what is at the core of all of what is being taught in the schools. Secularism. Secularism, which basically removes religion from all walks of life, except for private affairs. Anything which has to do with public affairs, education, health, whatever aspect in which the country is governing and regulating the public affairs of the society, religion is not supposed to play any part in it. This is the culture. It is a new culture. Prior to the 20th century, it was not the culture. The culture was a Christian culture. And what was taught in all of the various realms of society, in administration, in governance, in all the various areas, economics, etc., Christian culture was taught. Christian teachings Christian values. These were taught in the West. But since the 20th century, that has changed. With the dominance of the principle known as humanism, as people went away from religion, they focused on what they called humanism. We have to look at everything from the perspective of the human being. What benefits him is good. What doesn't benefit him is not good. We have the right to decide for ourselves what is good and what is not good. We do not need a God to tell us, because the God is of human making anyway. Everybody has a God. So many different gods. We may as well focus on man. We are human beings. We know what we need. We know what hurts us, what doesn't hurt us, etc. We can decide for ourselves what is best. So what has happened then in the school, and we look at three elements from the school: the teachers, the books, and the classmates. First and foremost, we find that teachers plant ideas. Books plant ideas, and classmates plant ideas. Plant ideas in the minds of the children and the youth in these school systems. Now, how do the teachers plant ideas? First and foremost, if you notice, in the early grades, grades 1, 2, 3, 4, there is one teacher who teaches all the subjects. She or he is known as the class teacher. He teaches all the subjects. Later on, you have different teachers: a teacher for math, a teacher for science, a teacher for... That class teacher, that one teacher, he or she establishes in the mind of the student a relationship which is stronger than the relationship that the student will have with his own or her own parents. The teacher is always right. They spend more time with the students than parents spend. If you look at the number of hours per week that they spend with that teacher, compare it to the hours that you as a parent spends with your children in the week, you cannot compare it. And they have, and they're stressing this point right now, what they call attachment teaching. Attachment teaching means that the teacher is supposed to attach himself or herself so closely to the child that they feel he or she is the one they must turn to for anything or for everything. Now there is a concept which came out earlier called attachment parenting. This was important in concept, which was to bring back the relationship between parents and their children. Important. Where we had a generation that came up, they call it Generation X, that were cut off from detached from their parents. They realized this was a product of Spock, not Spock from Star Trek, but another Spock, this Dr. Spock, who promoted this idea that children are little adults. They are little adults. You have to treat them like little adults. So they developed a mode of parenting which was really detachment parenting. As human beings, adults, you let other adults establish themselves, grow and develop without interfering. In the same way, it was to allow these children to grow up in that way. And this is the idea where for example, in terms of children, young children, put them in a crib. Crib separate from the bed, from you and the father and mother. And, if the kid cries, you go and you check the kid. Is he wet? Change his nappies. Is he hungry? Give him some milk. After that, if he cries, leave him. Otherwise, he's going to control your life. Every time he feels like he just wants a hug, you'll cry. Here you come running. You say, no, you want to have a life, right? Get a life, right? What do you need to do? You have to keep them separate, let them cry it out. After they've done that enough, they'll cry, cry, cry till they can't cry anymore. And they'll stop. They'll do that a few times, and then eventually they'll get to know that crying is not going to bring mom and dad. They thought that this was a good idea. But really, it was destructive. It is the idea that produced, Columbine massacres. The kids coming to school and shooting teachers and shooting students. And it is that mentality that produced that. A detached child who doesn't have a sense of humanity, a sense of love and closeness. He's lost it. His parents never gave it to him. Mother put a bottle in his mouth, or a pacifier. Whenever he cries, stick the pacifier in the mouth. What is supposed to go in his mouth is a breast. That's what Allah made it for. Not to put a piece of plastic in the child's mouth. But you see, that became a norm. And that affected the growth, the personality, the psychology of the children growing up. So they realized that this was damaging. They saw the results. So this movement for attachment parenting came as a reaction to that Dr. Spock approach. Part of the Dr. Spock approach is, which we're still living, don't hit the kids. Don't hit kids. Because just as you don't hit another adult, remember children are little adults, don't hit them. That's what he proposed. And of course, the consequence of removing corporal punishment from the educational process is a generation of rebels who can stand in open rebellion and threaten their parents and teachers and anybody. You dare hit me, you are in serious trouble. I call 911. That's it for you. That is what it has produced. So what's happened now with this attachment teaching, with the teacher becoming more trusted than the parent, that teacher will plant in the mind of the parent, of the child, concepts. Subtly. They will not dictate to them things that they will come back home and you repeat and they say, no, this is not right. They put it in their minds very subtly about how they relate with each other. In terms of behavioral patterns, what they're allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do, reward and to deprive them of reward. They use these to modify their behavior so that it falls in line with the secular ideals. Now, they work on these things along with the textbooks. The textbooks are carefully developed texts which have been honed over 100 years of teaching. Over 100 years of teaching, these skills have been put into the textbooks in such a way that the ideas in every single class, secular ideas are being implanted subliminally in the minds of the children. They've worked on these books, gone over the books, added, deleted, modified, till they have become instruments, powerful instruments. So powerful that even when we set up an Islamic school and we use those same textbooks, we don't achieve the goals that we're supposed to achieve from the Islamic school. That's how powerful they are. And this is one of the areas where Islamic schools, though they are the better alternative, this is the area in which they are suffering because they're using the same textbooks. So, the textbooks you will find introducing concepts like evolution. What is evolution about? How did we get here? We evolved. No God. No God is involved in this process. No need to include God. We got here by evolving. We were at first chemicals. Chemicals got together, created a cell. Cells got together, created a fish. Fishes got together, they climbed on land. They started to walk around on land. They became monkeys. Eventually those monkeys stood up and they became men. Okay. This is the story. This is what they tell them. No need for God here. It just happened. They also give them sex education. This is another thing. Sex education. They introduce sex education to reduce the spread of sexually transmitted diseases, right? STDs. However, studies done in Australia where they introduced sex education over 10 years, they found that it didn't reduce STDs. In fact, STDs increased. What happened was the end result was that the children became more sexually active at an earlier stage. They became more sexually active at an earlier stage. That is the consequence. Also, they will introduce homosexuality. We know now, Bill 13, we've all heard about it. These are the textbooks which are created to promote homosexuality. Now, these textbooks are already in the libraries across the city. My two dads, my two moms, they're there promoting subtly in the mind of the children that it's okay to have two dads or to have two moms. In fact, they will even make it appear more fun to have two dads than to have a dad and a mom. That's all. They'll put it in the stories, right? And then for the very small children, they will introduce the concepts of myths and truths. How do you distinguish between a myth and a truth? So they'll bring the story of fairies, for example, fairies. But these fairies are a myth. How do you know they're a myth? Have you ever seen a fairy? No. Have you ever touched a fairy? No. Have you ever smelled a fairy? No. It's a myth. It's not real. Of course, what comes along with fairies are angels. Because you can say the same thing about the angels, right? Secondly, they will go on to gremlins. Have you ever seen a gremlin? Well, in the movies. This movie is not real. Right? You ever smelled one? You ever touched one? No. What comes along with that? The jinn. And of course, the magic wand. The magic wand which they have in movies, the magician or whatever. What's that idiot from Harry Potter, whatever, yeah. Well, this magic wand. But then what comes along with that? This is a myth. What comes along with it? The staff of Musa, alayhi salam. So subtly, the ideas of myths, you're teaching them, all of these stories are all stories. But eventually, what did they come to? God. Is God a truth or is he a myth? And based on what they have learned about what is true and how you know something is true and what is a myth, they will conclude, you'll hear the children conclude, God is a myth. These are put in the minds of children in grades 3, grade 4. So what's happening here? This is dangerous stuff. It's coming in the textbooks subtly, and it's coming from the teachers. Teachers, utilizing these thoughts, these concepts. Then we have the issue of classmates, the impact of the classmates. Classmates also plant ideas. I remember the case of a young lady, young girl, young woman, 19 years old. Her mom came to me saying, my daughter wants to take off her hijab. She wants to take it off. She's been wearing it for the last 8 years. From she was 11 years old, in grade 5 or 6, she asked to wear hijab. Her mother's a practicing Muslim. So she was around other women wearing hijab, so she wanted to wear the hijab. So she asked, and she started to wear hijab in public school. But by the time she went into university at age 19, she's now in first year university, she comes to her mom and says, I want to take off the hijab. The mom is shocked. Where did that come from? You chose the hijab. You know as a Muslim you should be wearing it, etc. She wants to, she says, I don't feel comfortable with it anymore. I'm uncomfortable. No, I talked to her and convinced her that it's not an issue of comfort. Because if a doctor tells you, you got to wear a splint, you got to wear a bandage wrapped around your arm, it's not comfortable, but you do it, right? So God has asked you to wear this hijab. So whether you feel comfortable or not, you should do it, shouldn't you? Since you believe in God, right? But the point is that her friends at school, there were only 2 of the girls in the public school that she was going to. There were only 2 girls who had hijab. Only 2. She and another one. And all of the other Muslim girls didn't wear hijab. So she was slowly but surely feeling less and less comfortable. Her other friends who are Muslims, they're running around, their hair is all over the place, and of course the guys are attracted, and this is going to affect. So after 8 years, she comes under that pressure and she wants to take it off. Others talk about trying to defend homosexuality. Why is Islam so harsh against homosexuals? They can't understand what's wrong with it, Since God made them that way, why should we, take this kind of position against them, I have to explain, well, no, Allah made us to have natural relations, to produce children. It's a family structure, and we have all kinds of inclinations. Stuff comes into our heads from Satan, from our people around us, from the media, etc. All kinds of stuff can come into your head. But simply because it came into your head, do you have to go and do it? No. You don't have to do it. We do those things which Allah has made permissible, and we don't do those things which He has not made permissible. So, this is the reality of the public school. This is the reality and the danger of the public school. Education is in fact miseducation. And that is why it is not surprising that the vast majority of children who graduate from high school graduate confused about Islam. They don't know who they are, not sure about what Islam is, what a Muslim is. How do we tackle this? How do we correct it? Vast majority cannot put their children in Islamic schools. They're too expensive. They're not enough. So what to do? Well, what you can do is that as parents, you should be actively involved in their education. You should be at the school regularly. The teacher should see you. They should know your concerns. Whenever you see anything, you're there talking to the teacher. What's going on? This shouldn't be there. You're constantly involved in trying to monitor what is happening with your children. You don't just leave them to be taught or misguided. That can help. But the other option that we have, which a lot of people have not investigated, is homeschooling. Now, homeschooling is challenging. It involves a lot of commitment, but it can be done. There's a lot of non-Muslims in this country who are homeschooling their children, knowing that the school system is a failure. So they're teaching their children at home, so much so that in Ontario, in BC, the government itself has developed a homeschooling program. So anybody who wants to homeschool their children, they just have to go online. All the material is there. They even have, teachers who you can call up if you need help in explaining one part or one section, getting ideas. It's fully developed for homeschooling. And this system, I know one sister from Vancouver, Sister Hawa out in Vancouver, she has raised 5 kids, homeschooling all of them, from kindergarten to high school. She now has her son in the first year university. He's Hafiz Qur'an on the deen. Her second, a daughter, she's just graduating from high school, same thing, solid on the deen, hijab, conscious, etc. Third son in grade 12, he's going to graduate this year. He's also Hafiz Qur'an on the deen, solid. She has a child who's in grade 4 and another one in kindergarten. She's teaching them all at home. The people of Vancouver were so amazed, number of parents, that they brought their kids to her to help homeschool. So she has about 15 other kids that she is homeschooling in her home. And she is not a teacher. She was not a trained teacher. You could say, okay, she's got the background and all this kind of thing. But she knew what she had to do. She knew what she had to do. She's not a Canadian, born Canadian. She's from Somalia. She came here. She saw what was happening. She knew what she had to do, and she just worked on it. She would take some little courses here and there to increase her knowledge, to make her more capable of handling the situations. And she has done it. MashaAllah. So we need to know that we have to develop alternatives to the public school system from the way it is right now. Otherwise, we are fighting an uphill battle. We're losing, and we know it. Everybody knows it. The youth around us, those who make it to the masjid, you ask them, how many other kids in your class are Muslim? Where are they? 1 out of 10, 1 out of 20. It's a lost generation. So public school is really not a choice for Muslims. We may be forced because of circumstances, but we should be working to change it. The best change is to establish Islamic schools that have all of the necessary components that we need. That is best, but at least we should be actively involved in their parenting, and we should also be looking at homeschooling practically to guide them. So that's basically what I want to share with you this evening. Public school damage, for you to be aware of this. I'm sure you're aware of it, but you need to hear it. Maybe you need to hear it more times till it sinks in, and eventually you'll do something because something does need to be done. And alhamdulillah, at least we do have some options in terms of guidance to help us in such programs with our family, with our children, etc. I have established the Islamic Online University, which you can access here for free. Go and study courses there, which will give you the Islamic background necessary to help you to teach the various classes from an Islamic perspective. Because that's what we need, an Islamic perspective. So we need to ourselves educate ourselves about the deen. As the Prophet ﷺ told us, طَلَبُ الْعِلْمِ فَرِيدَ عَلَى كُلِّ Muslim, seeking knowledge is compulsory for every Muslim. We should be about that. Because if we are not educated, then we cannot educate. We cannot pass on education if we don't have education ourselves. So, inshallah, we hope that you all would take these thoughts to heart. You heard about Islamic School, and I'm sure you all know students who have come out of Islamic schools. Sure, they don't all make it, but the percentage of those who come out intact or conscious of themselves as Muslims is far higher than those who come out of the public school. So, barakallahu fikum, we pray and ask Allah to give us success in this effort. Okay. There's a video which is going to be played. You can go ahead and play it. This video is just an encouragement to join the Islamic Online University, and
so what the scholars of hadith, the imams of hadith did now is they put the hadith in categories. This is what you see in the books of Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, Abu Dawood, At-Tirmidhi, Sunan. The Sunan and the Sahihs, they're all chaptered.
What happens to a student when there's no momentum in the class? They become, yes sister? Bored. They become bored. We had a really good question and answer for the first 10 minutes. Then the teacher says, right, okay, that's my job done for today. Puts his feet up. Okay, everybody, page 26, questions 1 to 9. Where's the momentum? You had a fantastic start to the lesson. The momentum's gone, zapped.
These Gospels weren't written by companions of Jesus Christ. The canonical Gospels are the ones that are accepted. The Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. There is no credible evidence that they were written by companions of Jesus Christ.
Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he gave him a huge land, but he wasn't able to cultivate it all. He cultivated only part of that land. And then when Umar sallallahu alaihi wasallam came, he said, for the better of the community, I'm going to take these lands from you, which you are not using anyway.
Because whenever you are telling that hadith is sahih, that means you are telling about Allah and about Rasul. That means you are adding something or deleting something from the religion, proving. For this reason, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man kadhiba alayya muta'ammidan falyatabawwa maqadahu min nar."
Because Islam answered some of the questions, the fundamental questions of one's existence. Everyone asks these questions at some point in his life. Who am I? Where did I come from? What is the purpose of my life?
So the Islamic Online University is available for any one of you to access. Simply go on the net, type Islamic Online University or Islamic University, it'll pop up, Google, and take the benefit from it. It is there for you, it was created for you to help make Islamic knowledge accessible to everyone.